Hey guys, welcome back to Legal Marketing Live, presented by Spotlight Branding. My name is Daniel Decker. I'm a partner here at Spotlight Branding, and today I'm joined by a special guest, which is Ben Sarver, our Director of Client Services. So Ben, really excited to have you here today. We're going to take kind of a different angle. We're going to dive into website content and how to create great content for your law firm website. Before we do that, Ben, tell everybody, what does Director of Client Services mean? What do you do here at Spotlight Branding?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here today too. Like Danny said, my name's Ben Sarver. I'm the Director of Client Services here. My role basically entails overseeing the entire operations process at Spotlight Branding. So anything that our clients need, I have oversight over that process. So from the point that you sign up, throughout the entire client life cycle, the launch process, the monthly services, I'm going to be in charge of that. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the
Awesome.
client services side of it.
Awesome. Very cool. But before you transitioned into that role, you were our editor and content specialist, for about a year and a half?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you were responsible for...
Yeah, started out as a content specialist, writing lots and lots of blogs, web copy, social media, any sorts of content, and kind of worked my way up to become an editor as well, overseeing other writers, and that was any content needs that our clients had, I was responsible for.
Awesome. Yeah. So over that time, you probably oversaw hundreds of website projects and many hundreds of blog entries, if not into the thousands over
least,
the time.
I think we counted it up at one point, and it was well over 1,000 blogs that have been written in my time as a writer working here.
So if there's anybody qualified, at least here at Spotlight Branding, to talk about website content, it is you. So glad to have you on. Exactly. So let's jump in, right? Because there's a lot of lawyers out there who are obviously great lawyers. They're great at many things, but there's a difference between, even if you're a lawyer who's a really good writer, there's a big difference between legal writing, a brief for the court or whatever, versus writing for your website. So our objective here today is to kind of give some practical tips, ideas, hints, help for lawyers who are out there working on their own website. Maybe they don't want to hire a professional, whatever the case may be. So let's jump in. Let's talk about content for your website. And so let's start there. What do you think? Where do you think you should start when it comes to website content? Like, where do you start?
Sure. Like Danny said, writing for your digital presence for your website, your website in particular, is very different from writing legal briefs. Just because you're a skilled writer doesn't mean you necessarily know what needs to go on the website, right? So when it comes to actual website content, I think one of the biggest keys is making it very clear right off the bat who you are and what it is you do. You want someone who's who comes to your website and is viewing the website to immediately know, this is what this lawyer practices in, this is where they're located. It's all about providing practical information that your potential clients, any visitors to your website, can use.
Yeah. No, I love that. I feel like the job of your website, like as a whole, is really, you want to let website visitors, when they land on your website, know that they're in the right place. Or maybe let them know that they're not in the right place. That's fine. Like your website should serve as kind of a gatekeeper to make it clear to the right clients, your target market, that like, yes, I'm your guy, but also to make it clear to the people that like can't afford you or need help in a different practice area or whatever, that like you're not the right guy.
Right.
And that allows you to like save the wasted time of your staff answering a phone call and having to have a long conversation before ultimately realizing that they're in the wrong place. So no, I love that you said that, because it really is a gatekeeper. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see lawyers make is writing their content for like the wrong audience. Right. So they write maybe for bar reviews, they write maybe for their law school professors, whatever. You're probably a good writer if you earned your law degree. But there's a big difference between writing for other lawyers and for your peers versus writing for the public and writing specifically for like your target audience. So what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things you have to do when you're writing web content is to put yourself, any content really, any marketing content, is to put yourself in the position of the people that are going to be reading the blogs. You have to, imagine yourself as your audience so that you know what touch points that you need to hit, what's important for them to know. What's important for a lawyer to know may be very different from what's important for, you know, a potential client of a criminal defense lawyer or of a DUI lawyer. You know, you really have to consider who your audience is and write for that audience specifically.
I feel like a lot of lawyers tend to kind of just make their bio like the centerpiece of the content on their website. So maybe even try to throw it on their homepage. And it's like, like, it's great that you went to a good law school and all of that. Like, all of those things are good and there's a place for it. But your potential clients, like, that's not really what they're looking for. What they're really looking for is some reassurance that you get it, that you understand what they're going through, like, emotionally, that you understand that, like, their life may be hanging in the balance, their freedom may be hanging in the balance. And so given that, why would you lead with, like, your resume? You really shouldn't. You should try to lead with content that connects.
Right, absolutely. The, you know, content that's practical, content that connects. And, you know, another important element to consider when you're doing web copy is really attention spans. In a lot of cases, people have very short attention spans. And another mistake that I commonly see a lot of attorneys make is to try to put everything they possibly can, fit as much content as possible into their website, and not have it broken up in any way that's going to make it easier for viewers to read. It's again, it kind of goes back to that gateway, but making it really easy for viewers to kind of scan through the website and be able to see the important points that they need to know. You know, get to that practical information that's really important to them. I think a lot of people want to kind of show off their knowledge, and there's a place for that. It's important to be able to show that, you know, you understand what you're doing, that you're an expert in your craft, but there's a time and a place for it. And web copy isn't, you know, the homepage web copy, you know, your static web copy isn't necessarily the best place to do that.
So we've touched on a few common mistakes that we see. One other common mistake that drives me nuts is when people start the content writing process primarily from like an SEO filter. So rather than writing for their audience, they're writing primarily for Google search results. And they've been told that if you use X amount of keywords in X amount of headlines, it's going to help your site move up the rankings. And we talk about that a lot on this show, that we think that there's an overemphasis on Google in the first place. And sure, there's a place for SEO. Like, it's great to be seen on search engines, but there's so much more that your website should accomplish. Like, for example, what's the point of showing up high on Google if then people click through to your website and it's not engaging and they're not impressed and they don't hire you? So I would say, and I guess here's where it plays out practically. I've often seen where a lawyer will sit down to do their website content, and they're like guiding, like what they're using is a list of keywords. Like, they sit down and they're told, okay, write your website content and write it around these keywords. Basically find an excuse to squeeze these keywords into your content. And the results is just robotic sounding content. It just sounds terrible.
Yeah, there's no engagement at all. Your audience is not going to connect to it. It's, you know, people want to read content that is readable, as you know, simple as that sounds. You know, when they come to your website and they read this choppy, robotic sounding content, you're going to lose so much credibility right off the bat there. They don't, you know, have any concept that that's written for SEO rankings. They don't have any concept of why it's that way. They're just going to look at that and think, oh, this person can't write. You know, and this sounds terrible. I can't trust this person. So that, you know, when your content isn't readable, you know, easily digestible, practical, it just really fails to serve the purpose that you need it to serve.
No, couldn't agree more. Any other mistakes that jump to your mind? I think we've kind of covered the big ones, right?
Yeah, the bulk content writing was one of the biggest. You know, just overflowing content. That kind of just drones on. Writing for SEO is obviously one of the biggest.
And then writing for the wrong audience, we touched on too, which I think is critical. All right, so obviously we are going to suggest, as a company that we do websites, right, including obviously create website content. We obviously suggest if you're in a place to hire a professional firm, we think you're going to get the best results out of doing that, right? But obviously not everybody is in that situation. So a lot of lawyers find themselves, whether it's to save money or because they just want to, it's just a pride thing or whatever the reason is, that they want to do the website content themselves. So let's say we have people out there who want to go that route. Do you have any tips for them, Ben, as far as, like, considering how busy these people are and how hard it can be? Like, we've seen so often when someone says they want to write their own content, that what ends up happening is 6 months later it still hasn't been done because it constantly gets bumped because more important quote, more important things come up. What are your thoughts there as far as how to make sure it actually gets done?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to be honest with yourself about what your writing style is and what's going to work best for you. Obviously, as the professionals, who create web content, we would prefer people come through us, but for those who really are dedicated to doing it themselves, I think it's important to set aside time to actually schedule it and say, I'm going to take this hour and a half and work solely on content and nothing else. It's just not going to get done if you don't actually build time into your schedule on a daily basis, without the distractions. That's one of the most important things for me is, when I work as a writer, I would try to isolate myself in many cases, close my office. I wouldn't look at my email. I'd get some music on that, doesn't distract me, but also kind of drowns out anything else that's going on. So finding that way to isolate yourself so you're not distracted, so you can focus in. Another key thing for me was always to try to get in the headspace for a considerable period of time too.
Right.
You kind of have to turn a switch and go into a mode of writing that is going to continue throughout the whole project, whether it's web copy or blogs or anything else. And to actually be in that headspace is kind of a different headspace from going about your day-to-day business too. So trying to just write little bits at a time probably isn't going to serve you very well. You probably want to take a relatively significant amount of time, chunks of time, so you can stay in that headspace and knock out, lots of chunks.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's tough as attorneys because you've got a busy schedule, you've got clients, you've got court appearances, whatever. And so my suggestion would be treat the time that you're going to spend writing your website content as a non-negotiable. Put it on your calendar and treat it just the same as a client appointment. Because otherwise you're going to keep finding excuses and you're going to keep bumping it down the road, and then we end up 6 months later and the content's still not done.
You really have to remind yourself, like, this is a one-time thing that I'm doing, and once it's done, the benefits are going to be tenfold.
Exactly.
As far as the amount of time spent and things like that.
Exactly. All right, so one more topic I want to touch on before we wrap up here today, which is we've mentioned blogs, okay, but most of the time we've been talking about kind of your static website content, which is like your home page, maybe your about page, your contact page. These are pages that you write the content once and you typically don't really update it unless maybe you change
Very
your office
rarely.
address or you added a new employee or whatever it may be. But then we also talk about blog content, which is different. That's something that we create on an ongoing basis. If you guys aren't familiar with it, even if you go to our website, spotlightbranding.com, and then we have a free resources menu, and you can choose blog from the drop-down, and you'll see that that's something that we update a couple of times a month, hopefully on a weekly basis, but we don't always get there. But blog content is just it's something that you update on an ongoing basis, and then you can take those individual blog posts and you can share them out on social media. Right. You can put them in your email newsletter. So it's smaller pieces of content, often 300 to 500 words or so, that you can kind of use in just different ways throughout your marketing. So give us the quick hit thoughts on blogging. Like how should a lawyer start blogging? What topic should they choose? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different schools of thought on that. The way that we've always found connects the most with audiences, with potential clientele, is going to be really straightforward, practical topics. There's certainly a place for news and things like that, recapping, current events or that's relevant to your audience. But as far as really what's going to provide the most practical benefit to your audience, topics that are very easy to digest, that are practical, they can actually benefit from, that they're going to find some sort of use in. And that's going to be engaging, that they're going to look at and be interested in reading, for an business immigration attorney, for example, you may want to do 5 potential alternative visas to the H-1B visa. For a DUI attorney, you may want to do something along the lines of the steps you should take immediately following a DUI arrest. Things that, again, are going to be geared specifically towards your audience and providing them a practical benefit.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that kind of practical framework. It's not... kind of going back to what we talked about before, you're not writing these to impress your law school professor or any of that. You're writing it for people who landed on your website and are thinking about hiring you and probably do have some burning kind of practical questions. So I love that. I think if you focus your blog content on answering those practical questions, well, then what you're doing is you're establishing yourself as like an authority and an expert, and at the same time you're providing some great value for them and building rapport. And so whether they're ready to like make a hiring decision then and there, or whether they're still a couple weeks down the road, or whatever the case may be, you've already built that initial relationship and kind of broken down those barriers and hopefully made it easier for them to hire you. So I think that's great. You have any other final thoughts on blogging before we wrap up here?
Yeah, last thought, just avoid the legalese as much as possible too. That's one of the fastest way to turn a regular person, a non-lawyer, off. Is to just fill it full of legalese and to dive into the weeds of, you know, the law and that type of thing. Like you said, you know, you're not writing a legal brief. You're not writing to impress your law professor in law school. This is for average everyday people, and they want something that they can understand easily that's going to, you know, actually be able to help them. Yep.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Ben, thanks for joining me here today. It was a lot of fun. I think we provided some good information. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we will see you next week back here on Legal Marketing Live.
Thanks.